What was the most computer illiterate moment you've seen? My boss has to ask me every time he wants to search for an email in Outlook. Not even 20 minutes ago, he called me in again and I reminded him that the search function was where the little magnifying glass was. Like you're looking for clues, like a detective. That's why it's the search icon. I'm not looking for clues. I'm looking for an email. Where do I go for that? It's been a long day. Reminds me of my boss. He just skips the part where he pretends to understand and just makes me do it for him. Master's degree in computer science and I'm showing an old man how to add an image to a Word document. It was the mid-1980s. I was a little kid playing Tetris on my grandfather's computer. My great-great-aunt, who had been born in the 1890s, did all of the family genealogy stuff and knew lots of related regional history and was generally really interesting to be around. Someone had told her that people were using these new computer things to keep up with their genealogy info, and she didn't know anything about them but saw that I did. So after mentioning that, she started telling me some interesting story about distant relatives. I'm still playing Tetris. Later I figured out that she thought I was recording her story into the computer. 1890s kids just don't computer. Oh lord, this happened to me yesterday. 11 PM call from my dad. Son, I was looking at Facebook and I saw other people with my name, but the pictures weren't me. Yeah, that's normal. Other people can have your name. Oh, okay, good night. This one cracked me up the most out of this whole thread so far. Your poor dad, having to face the facts that there are people with the same name as him out there in the world. What a thing to learn on Facebook. We received a call because some guy's printer was printing crap with characters all over it. We racked our brain, changed cables, replaced drivers, and couldn't figure it out. I opened the paper tray and it had used paper in it. I showed him the paper and he said, "Yeah, but doesn't the printer white it out?" I'm actually kind of shocked that you changed the cables before checking the paper. When I was in 8th grade, my mom called the school and asked for me, which usually means something horrible has happened. I go down to the principal's office and pick up the line to hear, "How do I turn on the computer?" My grandfather once called me because he couldn't figure out why his typing was in all caps. Now, of course, we all know that old people are computer illiterate, but just for some extra context. My grandfather builds computers for money, mostly for friends or family members of his friends. It isn't a serious business. He taught himself how to do it as a hobby. He can't take an empty case and a bunch of loose hardware and build a rig from scratch. But God forbid he can figure out how to use one once he turns it on. It's like being a mechanic who can't drive a car. An older woman took a job in my department after lying and saying she was computer literate. The whole job is on the computer. Come to find out, she didn't know how to turn the computer on, didn't know how to use the mouse, didn't know any of the lingo, icons, right click, start menu, etc. Nothing. She got fired that day. Used to work in computer repair. The number of times I saw someone bring in only their monitor for a virus removal was, well, surprising. Agreed, a sizable majority of my clients assumed either the monitor or keyboard was the computer and that the computer itself was the modem. I work in a place where the whole job is sitting at a desktop computer for 8.5 hours a day. One time a guy in his 50s needed help finding something in our shared drive, so I went to sit with him and drive his mouse. It was then that I saw the chaos of his desktop. Thousands of files, infinite files. I hit Control and zoomed out until the icons were the size of ants, and I still couldn't capture them all on the screen. That's when I learned that he didn't know how folders work, and he'd been saving everything to his desktop for 20 plus years. Honestly, I was more impressed than depressed. Despite this computer illiteracy, this guy had managed to be a great employee. When I showed him how to make folders and drag and drop things into them and his eyes lit up, it felt like showing a caveman how to make fire. Okay, another one. Customer was adamant that he was right clicking. That's the response I would expect from a left click. Something might be wrong with the configure setting. Drive over. He clearly clicks the left button. I point this out. He was adamant this was a right click, because he is using his right hand, and also the mouse is on the right hand side of the computer, and even plugged into the right hand USB port. This physically hurts me. Grandma decided to pay me so she could have computer lessons. Lesson number 10. Remembering how to use your email. Me. Okay, Grandma. Now you need to type your password here. Actual Gmail login page. Grandma. Number. Me? Grandma. My computer tells me to never write my password anywhere, so I'm not writing it on this website. This website equals Gmail login page. She got extremely mad that I wouldn't help her get into her email. Now that's next level password protection. I owned a computer store for years. We have a lot of these stories. One is the government department that complained bitterly that the zip cartridges, floppies on steroids, and tape cartridges we were selling them seemed to have trouble keeping data without errors. I went to look, suspecting they were keeping them in a dusty environment, given the nature of the department, and found that no, they were in a clean office, in a sealed plastic tub, sitting on another tub filled with 300 pounds of magnets. Another business complained when we suggested they uninstall Apple desktop printing software because it was incompatible with their Epson printers. They kept reinstalling. Then we had to fix their problems and uninstall the software again. Eventually we find the issue with just not reinstalling the add-on software was they thought that if desktop printing was uninstalled they had to put their printers on the floor. Yes, it seems incredible, but these are not the most astonishing. When a guy at work tried to use the new vehicle tracking system, I was showing him how to use it and asked him to hover the mouse over the symbol of the van on screen. He picked up the mouse and held it up to the monitor. You should have said cursor. I had to set up a co-worker with their computer login and give them all the bookmarks to do their job. Not IT, just happened to be nearby. Me. Okay, so the username is your first and last name with no spaces in between. Her. Points to the saved login on the screen. Is that my name? Me. No, your name is not David. David, for reference, is the name of our IT guy. Her name was not anywhere near that. She didn't last a week. Given we use computers for 100% of the job, I think she lied about how proficient she was with computers. Not just computer illiterate but seems to be literally illiterate. A client that kept a massive quartz crystal next to their laptop because it supposedly absorbs the microwaves that cause cancer. It's a shame quartz crystals cause cancer, too. I used to work in a call center. I was trying to help this very nice old man get logged into his account. His password wasn't working. I wasn't in tech support, but I had to reset passwords and other light support issues. I spent forever with this guy trying to figure out why his new PW wasn't working. I don't remember what triggered it, but I started asking him about his keyboard. Was it wireless? Number. Okay, check the back of the computer to make sure it's plugged in. His response. Oh no, it's not there. I see the end right here next to me. Sir, I already told you that I am not a computer person. You're refusing to help me, so I'm going to hang up. My mom was complaining that a monthly 3G data plan had run out by week 2 while watching some Korean drama on YouTube. When I told her that watching YouTube video on a 2GB limit was a bad idea, she said I'm not downloading the episodes, just watching them. Was not fun trying to explain to her that watching videos on the internet is downloading. In her defense, I could see where the confusion might be if you don't know how a browser works. Most people just think of the browser as some sort of window to use to view the internet. Not the most but probably the most frustrating. The woman giving one of the orientation presentations when I started at my job. She would probably be one of the last people I would pick to present anything. She had some sort of disability, so she was in a wheelchair, hooked up to oxygen, and paused every few seconds to take wheezing breaths. Anyway, she got the PowerPoint started by pushing the mouse around until it was over the icon, then lifting up her hand and using one finger to click the mouse. Nothing happened, as she didn't double click. You could feel the tension in a room full of 20-year-olds, most with graduate degrees in some form of technology or engineering. After a few awkward instructions, one guy finally stood up and double clicked the icon, then showed her how to press PGDWN to advance the slides. Then there was the time my mom emailed me a document by printing it, scanning it, then attaching the image file. She has since learned a little more about computers. I work with a lot of small business owners who often have to send me paperwork, and the printing and scanning a document, or even better, printing and taking a picture with a cell phone, happens way too often. A few years ago, I'd been training a woman in her mid-50s to be my assistant manager in a tiny office setting. I spent several weeks teaching her all the programs and databases we used on the computer, but she had such trouble with everything I was legitimately worried the higher-ups would have to fire her, or that I'd be stuck doing everything. Then one day, she says, "Can I ask you a question?" She hadn't ever asked me questions before, preferring instead to barrel forward regardless of knowledge. So I was actually happy and said, "Yes, of course. What is this?" And she tapped on the computer. "The base unit." I wanted to die. "Hey, at least," she asked. My mum trying to use a mouse for the first time. She had it upside down and was using it like a roller ball. Every time she wanted to press a mouse button, she'd have to roll the whole mouse towards her and push down. To start with, she'd had the cable going away from her, but that just meant that all of her movements were reversed, i.e. if she wanted the pointer to move to the left, she'd have to roll right. It was a bit of a revelation when I showed her the proper way. TLDR, my mum using a mouse upside down and the wrong way round. My grandmother did this, but then she corrected me that it's a mouse. The tail comes out the back. My former office manager thought that to shut down a computer meant it would literally shut down and never, ever work again. She also didn't know how to use underline and would instead type a row of dashes and type whatever she wanted underlined on the line above. Office manager. By the way, I let my dad borrow my personal laptop a few months back. When I got it back, it was still on, in sleep mode. I opened it and found a multitude of tabs in Internet Explorer. All of them appeared to either be articles he opened from Facebook but never closed, or another tab with Facebook. Instead of going back to the original Facebook tab, he would open a new one and go back to the site. Only at that time did I remember him asking me, while Facebook never remembered where he was at when he was scrolling down. I'm laughing so much imagining him just scrolling and scrolling trying to get to the end of Facebook. Well, it may not be the most computer illiterate, but when my current boss interviewed for his job, he was required to take a finance competency test which involved solving some problems in Excel. At the end of the test, he stated that he needed more time because I wasn't given a calculator. He didn't know that Excel is a calculator. There's also a program called Calculator on every Windows computer. I was training a coworker. Tell her to go to Google. She Googles Google and clicks the first link. Ad that says GoogleNet. Told my boss. She lasted 2 days. I once saw someone trying to figure out how to turn on a computer at Best Buy. He called over a sales dude and said to him, "I tried typing in turn on but nothing is happening. How does this person exist?" You should have told him that he should have typed it in Chinese since many of the parts were made there. I work in IT at a university. We had a fairly new computer set up for an older faculty member. When he finally retired, I took it back to the shop to refurbish and redeploy. The DVD drive was jammed. Normally this means a disk was left in it and slipped a little sideways. After a lot more work than it normally takes, I found a 3.5 floppy disk inserted under the DVD tray. We haven't had floppy drives in at least 5 years and stopped having a supply of disks around 10 years ago. I have no idea what he was trying to do, how he managed to get it where it was, or even where he found one. Also, it was blank and unformatted. I visited an older lady at church once who said her computer got a bad computer virus and would shut off a minute or two after turning it on. Sounded unusual, so I turned it on to see what it was all about. I never heard of a virus do that. It came on, started booting till it read thermal error occurred and shut off, which signaled to me it was a faulty fan. Opening the tower revealed the whole thing was caked with dirt, so I took a vacuum cleaner and keyboard air to clean it out and it worked fine after that. Last I heard from her, she was passing on the info to her friends that viruses could be removed from a computer with a vacuum cleaner. Well, it's very wrong, but at least everyone she tells might actually maintain their computer somewhat. I had to explain to this grown woman, not elderly mind you, how to use a mouse. Like, she really could not comprehend the relationship between this physical object and the on-screen cursor. This was an entirely new concept. This was at a local library, and she was attempting to apply online for unemployment. I work at a library too. I meet people sometimes who have never used Google. Okay, this is more an embarrassing story for me than anything. I work at a big tech company that is vital to most people's computers. Meanwhile, my parents are extremely computer illiterate. I imagine worse than most people's because they don't even try to do anything before asking me. Anyways, my dad calls me while I'm at my desk one day and forces me to explain how to change a folder name over the phone at that very second. No, it could not wait. I realize as I'm explaining that this was going to be miserable. I mean, he didn't know what an icon was or even the desktop. It was a brutal balance of getting heated over my dad not understanding anything I was telling him and trying not to be loud so no one would hear me struggling to explain an extremely basic component of computing. He probably downloaded some P to the shared home PC and needed to hide it. A funny phrase I heard the other day. I was troubleshooting a guest Wi-Fi, and she said, "Oh, it's okay. I have free global Wi-Fi." My reaction was, "A what?" Her friend chimed in for me, "Do you mean 4 grams? Her oh yay, that. Free." She's got a terrible realization ahead. When my dad bought me my first computer, an Apple IIe, which I miss, he bought the whole thing. Duo disc, Apple color monitor, 3 boxes of discs, a printer. I was a very excited 3rd grader who wanted to show his favorite aunt the new computer that I was the only person who knew how to use it. "Look how smart I am." She asked me how I could use the typewriter if the TV was on top of it. I mean, that's not that surprising in 1983. I work in an electronics retail store. I had a customer buy a modem then return it because it didn't work. When asked who her internet service provider was, she said she didn't have one. She thought you could buy a modem and just pull internet out of the air. I had another customer a couple years ago come in because his phone stopped working. I take a look at it and the screen is black with carbon residue on it and it is separating from the body. I asked him what happened and he said he dropped it in water. So he put it in his oven and baked it at 100 degrees Fahrenheit for 5 minutes to dry it out. Then he did it a second time because it didn't completely dry the first time. There's your problem. You forgot to flip it over halfway through. My friend is a librarian, and she always tells us about all the frustrating crap at work that she has to put up with when it comes to helping people use the computers. Some woman needed help checking her email. She didn't know her username and password. She didn't even realize she had a username and password because it was saved and would keep her logged in on her computer at home. Presumably because her child or grandchild set it up for her and she never had to log in again. Friend helps her get her password reset, which was huge pain in the butt. What really gets me is that when that woman went home, she assuredly would be unable to log into her email again because the password was changed. Probably cursed the librarian for messing up her computer. Same woman didn't know what right click was. Okay, I'm ashamed to say this was me. In my first year of secondary school, high school, we went into the computer labs and logged on, etc. But I still couldn't get the dang screen to turn on. Why, you ask? Because I was pressing the icon on the right side of the screen that meant power on, as if it were a touch screen. The button was on the side of the monitor. I spent 40 minutes doing this. 40 freaking minutes. Some monitors are actually like that now. I had a coworker who called me in a panic because every time she clicked her Mac's mouse a little menu appeared. I walked into her office, looked at her computer and told that she had a dictionary error. She literally had a dictionary sitting on the left edge of her keyboard and it was holding down the control key. It once took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out why my Word document was suddenly full of long blank spaces. I looked down at my keyboard eventually and noticed my own boobs were resting on the space bar and I hadn't noticed. Whoops. I was giving blood one day, and they had a computer terminal for check-in. There was a lady there before me who was confused, saying that she doesn't use computers. I tried to just walk her through typing in her own name, but she just looked at the computer like it was going to explode if she touched it. Thankfully someone who worked at the Blood Institute came up around then, at which I just excused myself so he could deal with her. Looking back, I came up with an alternate theory. She may have been illiterate and using technophobia as an excuse to hide the fact that she literally cannot spell her own name. The number of adults who manage to function in modern society without knowing how to read is surprisingly high, and it makes more sense than push the keys with letters in the order that spells your name being too difficult to understand. I changed a relative's life by showing her Control-C, Control-V. Apparently she used to just retype stuff out again. Actually I swear my copy-paste powers are my main asset working for state government too. At least they were when I started less than 10 years ago. I earned my reputation as a computer guru when I showed the Office Control-Z. My dad doesn't understand how tabs work. Every time exit a window just to double click internet again. I've showed him probably a dozen times, he still does it. He's only 52. He also has an Android smartphone. I don't comes to me to ask me how things work. My dad treats his hundreds of multiple tabs like an archive and gets mad if someone closes one. He expects to be able to go back to his collection of open tabs forever. I had a conversation with my older boss that ended up lasting a full hour because he was given a Word document with pictures of someone else's monitor inside. And no, not like a screen capture, an actual photo of a screen monitor with text showing. He wanted to edit the text and send it back, and it took an embarrassingly long time to explain the difference between text and images. His position? CEO of a software company that he himself founded. How the heck can you be that dense about computers and own your own software company? I'm not paying to explain work. I'm paying you to do whatever I desire. When my cat walked on my keyboard. In all seriousness, I think it's when I saw an attorney request his secretary to print out a web page from a site he found onto paper, then have the secretary scan the paper to him so it arrives to the attorney on his computer's email, so he can forward the email to a client in order for them to see the web address. Billable hours. Not completely illiterate, but literate enough to make this hilarious mistake. I was working in software support for a website my company has. I asked the user to send me a screenshot of the error they were getting. So what do? Print screen. Good start. Paste into Word. Print in black and white. Scan printed copy. Email me the scanned copy. Points for creativity. Oh, this is easy. I am a professor and teach the sort of bioinformatics for dummies class. I have had multiple students who don't know that you press enter after you put in a command. They think everything is like Google and just finishes your thought for you and runs the command. Coworker came up to me and asked me where the Q button was. He had a customer and said he was there looking for it for 45 minutes. Yesterday is a good one. User calls about her wireless mouse not working. I asked if she unplugged anything, if it was on, the LED battery light color, etc. Nada. I go up. It's working. I leave. She calls 20 minutes later with same issue. I ask again if she changed anything. She says no. She only plugged her phone into charge. I go back up and she took out her phone cable. So I see she removed the USB receiver to plug in her phone. Lady, you changed something and you didn't like the results. Change it back. She probably won't call me again. I worked help desk and support for a group of medical clinics and have a few fun stories. I had a doctor call and complaining that his computer was beeping at him. I could actually hear it in the background and told him that I'm pretty sure he just has a key stuck on his keyboard. He informed me that I was wrong and that his PC was broken and he needed a new one ASAP. So rather than argue, I told him I would be out to check it personally. I walk into his office to the sound of a constant beep and identified the problem immediately. He started to ask me when he would expect a new PC, because he had a lot of work to do, maintaining eye contact. I fixed the problem. He had apparently run out of room on his desk for the latest drug rep paperweight, so he had left it on the number pad portion of the keyboard since he didn't use those keys that much. I'm an elementary school teacher and during our first week of school teachers are there setting up rooms without kids. During that time I had to help 8 people set up their Apple TVs. Setting up an Apple TV is literally plugging in an HDMI cable and the power cord. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.